Okay, yeah, I guess we could start. Um, how is everyone? Hope you're well. And I hope you're in a good space today to go into a really interesting conversation. Yeah, let's maybe open the space. Who is experiencing dreams, shifts in their sleep-wake cycle? Either when you began the work, when you went deep, maybe you came into the trainings, the immersions, or just the experience. Did you notice anything in particular that was interesting to do with the dream state, sleeping in general? Just to open the space, and I guess there would be more people joining us, but this is just to warm up. Does this
I'd like
interest you?
to hear.
Yes,
Sorry.
who is this? Natalia.
Hi. Hi. I like to share an experience I had this week. I I had this dream that was just in a loop. I felt like I had it like about 6 times, one after the other. And it was the sensation was like the second time that I was dreaming, I actually thought I was awake. And this time was the real thing. And then it happened again, and then I realized I was dreaming, and then I started dreaming away again, and I thought, okay, this one is the real one, now I'm awake. And it just happened like 6 times. And I found that very interesting because it also felt very vivid, like it just felt very real. So I don't know, I just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. What's interesting as well is some people actually had inner dance experiences where they would wake up from the session and then they realize that they're still in it. And then they'd wake up from that and then they'd realize that they're still in it. So this thing about dream levels, this dream inception space is actually quite trippy. Okay, amazing. Thank you, Natalia. Anyone else who'd like to share anything about dreaming, sleeping, waking? Okay, so yeah, it's thank you, Natalia, for being the one. All right.
Hi,
So yes, please. Who is this?
it's Habiba.
Habiba. Yes.
How are you? How is everyone? Um, Recently I've noticed after journeying with like the sleep playlists and also Floor's playlist, becoming water in specific, um, I've noticed that in my dreams it started just being a, a dream within a dream, an inception kind of thing, but there's no content which is new for me. Like, not that I used to dream a lot of content, but like there always used to be this feeling that okay, something happened, I don't really remember it or whatever. But it's just recently it's been all, yeah, black, and then time and space, and also just did an astral projection where astral projection felt pretty much as my normal sleep. um, but yet again, no visuals, no content, um, right now.
Yeah, that's interesting too. Uh, it's like almost dimensional when we don't remember. It's more like there's remembrance, and also there's what stage in the journey did we wake up in, understanding that there's not just one dream, there are different stages of dream. So at what point did you wake up? And then that's what you remember. So when it's not content, it's more like the medium, which is the channel, which is also understood as a dimension. Like what dimension did you wake up in? And then that's what you remember. So this is amazing. Thank you.
so much.
Mm. Okay, so let's start. There's a bunch of people here already. I really wanted to get into this topic for a while now, but I'm holding back. There's so much in it. And when I conduct preparations for talking about sleep and dreaming, my notebook just blows up because there's so many ideas, so many memories, so many concepts that converge. And a lot of people may not realize this, like people like to use the word the trip, the journey, and then the word dream comes up, but the word comes up in a figurative way. But there's actually so much in the dream structure, in the science and the spirit, the philosophy of dream that begins to explain inner dance. And the more we bring understanding to this, we actually realize that we're always dreaming. We're always dreaming. So there's something waking up in the process. There is a real awakening. Sometimes we think it's us who's awakening, but like who is really waking up? Like something's waking up. And this is very constant. When we dream, we actually wake something up. It's the perfect irony. The only reason why we're sleeping is we're actually waking something up. And then when we undergo a real awakening, something's going to sleep. So somehow we're actually entering into the consciousness of sleep. Nothing could be more ironical or paradoxical, because we think sleep is the cessation or the ending of consciousness. It's when consciousness stops. But actually, that's where a consciousness begins. And this might come clear when we die. We would visit the same place as where we go when we actually sleep. So death, we normally think of as an ending, but death is in a way like a beginning. So understanding sleep actually brings understanding to real life, which is what happens when we die. So that's partly why things are fascinating. I want to go into a sharing space as to just share the screen. Okay, there. All right, so I'm still trying to wake up as well. It's 1 o'clock or 1:09 in the morning to be exact here. Open up the screen. Okay, so I want to talk about an experience I had, and this was after I had met the Mexican. I was walking across the Philippines after I just left everything. I was on the way to the island. It took me a year to find the island. So I had an experience on one of the islands in the Philippines. It was in Camiguin. I can't explain why I went there, but I had an experience of death. I've experienced dying many times, and it could have been an actual near death, or it could have been a real ego death, where I left my person, my ego, my mind, my body. But what was interesting was after I had experienced like myself dying, letting go of my, like myself, I basically experienced like an opposition to birth. I experienced like an opposition to death. Sorry. I experienced a birth. Okay. And it was very strange. I can't exactly remember it, but I experienced myself as a soul considering, okay, what if I entered this person? I don't remember if it was actually me or if it was my next life or another life, but I saw what is called a birth vision. Okay, now when we die, what we experience is the life review, which is the experience of everything that had happened to you when you were alive in all of its potencies, in all of its nonlinear considerations. It's not just a line where you experience everything that you've gone through. There's something a lot more nonlinear about your life that isn't just how you thought you had experienced it. Now, the birth vision is the opposite of the life review. It's like you experience your life before you even entered it. So that brought me to an understanding of time. Like time is not linear, where let's say you have a starting point, you were born, and then say this is birth, and then when you're done here, it's all over. You're dead. It's actually quite interesting that I went through this weird sensation where um, it was like birth was the ending. It's like, okay, I'm married to a Finnish woman, so it's like probably they would know better. They're Finnish before they even start. They were finished before they even started. But so I experienced the same thing. I was already finished even at the point of death. So I've been bearing this conceptualization of time where things are actually backwards. And when we die, there's something that's already been lived. And that actually helps me quite a lot in terms of living, because I could enjoy every moment, understanding that. But beyond this understanding that like life is a line, it's more like time exploded into many different pathways, so that the birth vision isn't really just like a vision of a lifetime that had been lived, as if there was a past that delivers us into the future. It's more like there are so many, like infinite varieties, variations, possibilities of life. And the birth vision is like the highest experience of love and light and fulfillment that could ever be lived. It's like the highest you. And all of these are converging upon you. Like the highest isn't just the one thing. It's like many, many different possibilities, many experiences, many creations, many perceptions converging into a one space. And yeah, so for me, that's how time is. So I would like to talk about like what is time with you? Like what is time? So when we experience dreaming, time goes strange. Time becomes weird. And what we do is we flip-flop between time and space, and time and spaces where no time exists, and back into time. And I guess that's what we would consider between states of consciousness. And the two basic states of consciousness would be when we are asleep and when we are awake. So I would ask you, what would happen if you woke up while you were sleeping, but you still were not awake? So this is why Natalie's sharing is actually perfect. What would you do? What could you do with that if you woke up while you were sleeping and you weren't awake yet, but you were, but you're still sleeping? What is sleep as a consciousness? Now, one way of looking at this is this shouldn't be an unfamiliar thought. This is the place of origin. This is where we came from. So that wake is an extension of the consciousness of sleep. Okay, when we were in the womb, when we were in the womb, we were sleeping. So especially the last 2 weeks of um, gestation, when we were in the womb, we were doing nothing else but sleep and dream. Okay, we were in the REM state 95% of the time, and we were sleeping about 95% of the time. We weren't doing this as much. We were in the womb, and when you leave the womb, you're not as much doing it anymore. So we came from the dream. We started off as dreamers, and somehow we would wake up more and more and more. Okay, so babies are dreaming, and let's say you're not in the womb anymore. You've exited the womb. Um, Newborn infants would be sleeping about 18 to 19 hours a day. Let's say 18 to 19 hours a day. And then by the time the baby is about 4 months, this would be reduced to about 17 to 18. Maybe an hour less, could be 16 to 17. And then by the time we're 6 months, we're sleeping only 16 to 15, maybe 14 to 15 hours per day. So when we keep growing up, we actually lose sleep. Sleep becomes less and less and less. So when you go vertical, see, the older you get, by the age of 6, this is when you reduced sleep time to about 9 hours, 10 hours, 8 hours. So now how many hours you're sleeping? And in that sleep time, how many hours are you dreaming? So we tend to dream less, and this awareness or consciousness called REM state is something we say goodbye to, okay, the older we get. So it's interesting to understand the work that we do, the inner dance, the awakening process is actually a return to the sleep process. Do you understand how contradictory, how insane that is? That to awaken is actually to go back to sleep, to go back to the dream state. Um, so that could start to explain like a lot of things. The inner dance is in fact like a remembrance, right? It's a remembrance. It's a way of remembering something that we used to know, like something we came from. It's embering again. The ember is like the last vestiges of fire. So you don't have to learn anything. It's something you already know. That's why this somehow feels quite easy. So let's look at these different states of consciousness. And one way we can start with this is that there are different ways of understanding, coming into understanding. When we come into the dream and into the inner dance process, let's say we use these symbols, which can be quite useful. Like maybe like this could even be an understanding of time. Okay, the time in the ancients was seen through the hourglass. So either awareness could be like the top of the hourglass. So let's separate this for now, just so you can look at these different types of awareness. This is what we might call like convergent awareness, convergent thinking. Like in the dream state, there's a kind of convergence where, like in an hourglass, you would have the particles of sand all built up. And you can think of this like as time. So let's say you have all these particles that belong either in the future or in the past. And then the sand would trickle from this space or spatiality. What time does is it trickles the all at once into the one at a time. Okay, that's sort of like how time works. So space holds like all the sand particles, and time trickles events, words, thoughts into manageable parts, what came from the whole. And this might, so there's a kind of convergent knowing when we come into the psychedelic state, the awakening state, the dream state, where we're able to converge multiplicities or simultaneities into sequentialities, like the all at once becomes like the one at a time. There's the oneness is here, either from the point of death or birth, like we began or ended there. And there's a kind of pre-cognitive state there to somehow know even before it has happened, what is. Some people call that trust. It's intuition. It's like, I don't know it, I haven't experienced it, but somehow I've been there, And okay, now maybe when we look at the pyramid that's right side up, what would it be like to invert that? So let's say coming from maybe the top, and then you have the particles trickling into the bottom. There's something about like the base where there's a kind of divergent knowing. It's not maybe pre-cognitivism, it's just this post-cognition or post-cognitive the experience. It's like I know it after it has happened. I know it because I've done the work, and I'm able to see things in a way that integrates like everything that I've been through, like my life. So that's where maybe the life review and the birth vision can come together. Which part of this is inner dance as a construct? It has to be both somehow. It's got to be both in a way. And I feel this is the dream. This is the dream state. When you bring these two together, you can either experience convergent or divergent awareness. Now, a lot of people, when they go into the transformation process or the healing process, there's more interest in the convergent, okay? The point of collapse, point of death, point of surrender. And it's not always as obvious. The opposite. There's the point of birth, but also the point of synthesis is a good word that we could look at today, and integration. Like somehow it all comes together. Like it's easier to see how there's release of emotions, the release of the old self, that we're here to just throw out the old. So what does it mean to actually bring about wholeness or integration? So I think that's going to be interesting, and dream can actually hold powers that bring awareness for both. Okay, so we had a call yesterday or a day and a half ago. There was a lot there, so I would advise those of you who haven't seen it, you have the time. I'm not going to repeat some of the concepts that went into sleep and dream, because it's such a big topic. I want to use both calls to go into concepts. So one of the concepts I want to go into today is, what is memory? And when you go to sleep, what happens to memory? Are you remembering old memories, or are you actually creating new memories? Are you creating the space where new memories can arise? I like to think that it's both. But usually when you think about memory, it's usually what has happened in the past. It's not always understandable. You can actually access the future when you are dreaming. So there is future memory waiting for you to claim it, to recognize it, like in a way. Sigmund Freud said something really, really interesting. He said, dreams are like stars. And they're actually always there, but we can only see them at night. This is something we're learning from the inner dance journey is we suddenly see what's always there. Suddenly you lay down, close your eyes, and you surrender. And suddenly something changes. When you were standing up, does it mean it wasn't there? You were there minding your own business, happy as you might be, and then suddenly you lay down and suddenly you see them. Like, whoa, they're there. So what changed, right? Did they appear from nowhere, or were they always there to begin with? So dreaming seems to be an emergent process. Emergence isn't really just to make stuff up that wasn't there. It's just to make visible what had always been there. So in a way, we are dreaming of old and new elements. And I'd like to go a little bit into the sciences in order to understand more or less like what could be happening when we're dreaming. Now, back to memory, I want to just pay attention to the fact that a lot of people who do healing work and transformation work and spiritual work, it's actually possible that memory goes away. Okay. Like I've observed a lot of like healers, so-called teachers and awakened ones, and they actually lose their memory. Like they either lose episodic memory, short-term memory, they virtually cannot remember like certain details. That's either numbers, names, words. So we're doing something to the brain when we experience or go into what many people call energy, what some people might prefer to call light. Some people might call it like electricity. When you electrocute your brain, you can affect many things. Some people might lose their language. Then how much we can talk about that today. Some people experience aphasia or light language, which is a losing of normative linear language that uses proper syntax, proper semantics. So language can go away. Memory can also go away, either momentarily, temporally, or I'm not going to say permanently, I'd say spatially. It's about time and space always. So I'm interested in how people lose memory, and I'm also interested in the opposite. Like there are some people who actually start to gain memory, and neuroplasticity is at work. So you as facilitator or pilgrim, I'd like to bring this up with you, and the awareness of these concepts will help you to facilitate these different modalities of energy. Like a lot of trainings, they do favor, okay, stop thinking, don't ask questions, don't use your head, undergo the dying process, just let go, release, surrender. A lot of the frameworks, like floating out there, it's about like losing one's memory. And a lot of spiritual scripture or literature, they do talk about that. It's like you need to let go of your story. And there's nothing wrong with that, like in certain states and stages. But that's also coming from a paradigm where you can actually disappear. You can actually throw away the old part of you. Oh, wait, my pen isn't working. It should be working. Oops. Okay, sorry. Um, but that's a paradigm. Can you actually throw away the old? I don't believe that. I don't experience things in that way. The old part of you, the young girl, the young boy, will never go away. This is something that you did choose in your current experimentation. You gifted yourself with that. So either you forget or you remember. or you transform. And I think when you do bring together the new and the old, what happens is you take the old and you make that something else, but it's actually still founded in the old. But I know a lot of people who really are focused on, let's say, trauma work, like, oh, that really happened. But it happened. Everything happens for a reason. So how can you build on that and bring about like a transformation? So they'd speak to each other. And in a way, it's going to get confusing when you do go into the dream. Within the dream setting, something that would happen is the past becomes the future, and then the future can actually become the past. A lot of people are stuck with the notion that you can't change your past because it's already happened. But what if your past is actually in the future? You can change your past. I believe that, and you can do that by visiting it. So you can either forget or you can remember, and in remembering, there could be a transformation. So I wouldn't like you to just lose your memories. Please don't lose your memories. Please, in fact, develop your memories, expand your memories, explore your memories in a way that's not scared, that's not judgmental, that starts to just play. And so we're going to be studying the aspects of the brain that relives those memories. We will specifically talk about the hippocampus, but we would need to talk about certain parts of the limbic or the subcortical structures that are connected to the hippocampus. We talk about the thalamus. You could speak about the hypothalamus. We need to put that underneath because hypo normally means underneath the thalamus. And these are powerful structures that we trigger when we conduct the inner dance process. And when we go to sleep, these are always in transition. All right. So that's maybe an abstract or an intro of what we're going to be going through today. Okay, not that. All right. So let's go into frameworks. Okay. So we'd be looking at maps that understands, let's say, circadian rhythms. So let's stay there. That notice more the timelines, like at the bottom. This is time, and depending on what time it is, you're either more awake or you're more asleep. And there are changes that happen. In the last call, we went quite a bit into the changes in temperature. I think this is really interesting, isn't it? That when you go into the journey, there are points in which temperature either goes up or rises, or there's a part where the heat dissipates and temperature drops. So it would be interesting for you to realize that depending on what time of the day or what's going on in the human being, is the person hot? Is the body warm? Okay, what month of the year is it? What time of the day is it? Or did you just eat like a heavy meal? Is your body hot or is your body cool? That would determine what you're going to go through, in fact. So one interesting thing about wake and sleep is when people go to sleep when temperature is high, you actually would tend to go into the dream state a lot quicker and a lot longer. Okay, so this might be around 9, not longer, but maybe you would fall asleep the longest. Okay, that would be the better way of putting it. So if you try to go to sleep when your temperature is cool, it actually becomes very difficult to sleep. So a lot of people who have shift work, let's say graveyard work, they have a hard time sleeping. Even though they're sleepy, they can't sleep. It's because they're sleeping when the core body temperature is cool. Okay. So in the work that we do, it does actually matter what time of the day you're conducting the journey, or when are you laying down. Like the time of the day would determine it because of melatonin, cortisol, testosterone, estrogen, epinephrine, like what chemistries are there when you lay down? And I'm helping you to notice as well. Like there's a reason why the body gets warm. Why does the body get warm during the beginning of the process for many people? It doesn't matter if the room is cold, the body gets warm, and then the temperature drops, and suddenly you're there, you're in the dream state. So here, this would be maybe the most dreamy state. Sorry, I'm having a hard time drawing. I'm just using my cursor. The 3 o'clock in the morning state is when core body temperature is low, melatonin is high, cortisol is still low, it hasn't really climbed up yet. So this would be the dreamiest place. This is where you want to take people when you bring them into these dream within dream levels, these inception levels. The deepest dimensions are available when core body temperature is lowest. And you, even if people aren't sleeping, maybe the session is happening like sometime here or here and here. If you can raise up melatonin levels, acetylcholine levels, um, like that's when the deepest dimensions are happening. Now, in the inner dance, the journeys that we do, the wave doesn't actually look like this. Core body temperature can drop, okay, but melatonin levels can rise up, can go into production mode and can be released, but cortisol levels are allowed to go up. So this is cortisol, and it could shoot up as well, which would allow the co-activation of hot and cold, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So we're playing with these lines. Like when you go through a process, we're actually changing these patterns. And these shifts comprise a compressed awakening mode, where what normally happens in a whole day or a month or a year or a lifetime, it happens like in an hour. It happens like in 90 minutes. So that would be maybe the basic. We would study we'd study the brain waves, start to get interested in, okay, this is what I look like right now. My eyes are open, I'm sitting up. And then tonight, I would have to look like this. You ask yourselves, if I'm energy, what would I look like? The EEG can say a lot. And then there's something about this one that I would like to go over: the sleep spindles and the K complexes. And then when you look at this one, like delta, let's look at maybe another one that might be more conclusive here, maybe. Okay, so when you go into the deep non-REM 3, some people call it stage 4, but they've simplified that to just N3, stage 3. This doesn't look deep to you, does it? Because the power is high, the amplitude is high, the volume is ramped up. This is deep primarily because delta has less frequencies. Okay, so what you would look at would be the cycles per second. There's less waves per second or per event, as compared to here. When you're awake, there's more waves per second, or hertz. There's more hertz. There's less hertz here. It slows down, go into theta, then sleep spindles and K complexes would come up. We want to understand that because you're actually committing to this. When you conduct a journey, either for yourself or for others, these start to appear when you ask someone to lay down. Okay, they're standing up, eyes are open, and then they lay down. These would start to show up. Then these would start to show up, and then the person would look like this until such time this very interesting thing happens where it's somewhat like the awake state. This is what science practitioners noticed maybe 60 years ago, 50 years ago, when we started to study their brain waves, that we actually start to wake up when we're dreaming and when we're sleeping. The EEG start to mimic what the awake state looks like. So we want to understand, okay, what actually is happening? Okay, let's go back to the screen. So in the trainings for a long time now, I would say 15, no, maybe 14, 13 years, you've been studying the playlist system. We didn't always have explanations to why the music needed to look like this, but there is so much understanding in the inner dance process as to why the waves do look like this, and it's based on, it's based on what I just showed you, but mostly from like a narrative or a story-based perspective. That the inner dance is a journey from non-REM 1, 2, and non-REM 3 sleep stages that deliver us into REM state. Now, why does REM state look like this? It's maybe a range here. It may not actually last that long, but we like to visit upon it as if it was lasting long. It could last long. Maybe that's one of our goals, to allow the dream state to last longer. So the science and spirit of inner dance is this. It's comprised in this, and maybe there are infinite ways of understanding this, but let's start from the compression, the condensation. You are bringing people into the dream state, so you are studying the stages of sleep. Okay, sleep stages. Because it has so much to tell us, more than the stages of wake. You need to bring people to sleep mode in order to wake something up. So we study that, and there would be brain states there. So I want to unravel this in a way that I may not be able to do so in the trainings that we conduct in Maya, where we don't have as much time. To devote more time means to come into greater understanding. Okay, the notion is very simple. You get people to activate partially the parasympathetic nervous system in the beginning, to get them to rest, to get them to slow down what is sped up in the beta consciousness. You know, you'd like them to drop down into the deeper states. This would be the deeper state. This would be deeper state. This is somewhat trying to go into deeper state. This is the deeper state. So that's your goal, so that you can bring them into the higher state. And REM could be that, like an ability to go up means initially you need to go down. And you need to understand how the body's actually doing that every night. You have about 4 or 5 stages of or cycles of sleep every night. If you're lucky, say if you're lucky, you have 5 stages. If not, you know, you have 3 or 2. That means you may not have gotten enough REM sleep. But if you are able to achieve REM sleep early, this is called SOREM, or in sleep science, sleep onset REM period. If you have an ability of going to sleep and you dive straight into REM, it normally takes humans 60 to 90 minutes to enter the first REM. Then that's amazing. And if you can extend REM longer, you don't actually need to sleep as much, because one of the big reasons why you go to sleep is to achieve REM state. But to achieve that, you also need non-REM sleep stages. And there are many gifts that non-REM brings. So one of the big questions in sleep science for some time now is, why do you need these 2 classifications? Like, what is so important in non-REM? Because these are the states of consciousness. Okay, these are the 3 states of consciousness. There are 3 states. It's when you're awake, which is now, and to go into the dream, you need to pass through here. And these 3 give gifts. So now we study a mysterious, we don't know what it is. You can call it inner dance, Kundalini awakening, psychedelic journey into the infinite, the divine feminine. There's something about the 4th state. Maybe there's a 5th state, but let's not confuse ourselves. That's actually a combination of wake, I would say possibly non-REM wake or REM wake, which is to mimic what's happening when you're sleeping while you're awake, either in non-REM or REM. And there are actually different types of non-REM and different types of REM too. You can talk about tonic REM or phasic REM, or you can talk about non-REM 1 or non-REM 2, or actually, yeah, like non-REM 3. And they're all beautiful. They're all amazing. So what's the difference between tonic and phasic REM? Tonic is REM state where the eyes aren't moving, but it's actually possible that your body would move in phasic REM. Like you haven't paralyzed your body in the way that you normally would. And you might be twitching. And yeah, so these are interesting. We're going to be talking about these today. Okay, so let's go into the practical. When you get people to lay down, you're taking them already on the journey. So okay, we don't need like this one. So let's remove this for now. We don't need this. But also, okay, I don't need this as much right now. If we're gonna journey, I need this to not be so much there. So there has to be a movement from there. So most people need to go through there first, but some people can go into sleep onset REM period, which is go straight into the dream. So there would be participants, and that could be you. You're so used to activating yourself in the journey, so you can go straight here. You don't even need to pass through non-REM. But it could be interesting that if you're so activated that you can then just come here as well. If you need more of that, that would balance you out. If you're too activated, you need to then deactivate a lot of those so-called activations. And then a lot of these need to then borrow into like this state here. So you're playing around with this. You're actually jumping from one state to the other, practicing what it means to be sleeping, to be awake, to be in the space in between. Inner dance is more or less like the space in between. So you need to be tricky. Like, what are your techniques, your tools? Okay, so I get them to lay down. So that's to do with body position. That would affect the vestibular function, sense of balance, sense of this is really, really important, especially when we bring up the memory part. When you are in the upright position, eyes open. Wait, that looks like an alien. Okay, this is you. Hi, that's cute. So let's say you're standing up in an upright position. Your consciousness would be shaped like in a certain way. So when you lay down, you you change the position, and something that is also undergoing a change is a sense of place. Okay, like somewhere in your brain, you are actually placing yourself. You're clearly like here, you're sitting down somewhere in your home, maybe you're located like in a certain way. You're positioning yourself. So when you ask someone to lay down, you're actually shifting position, and one way of understanding that is you're displacing. There's a displacement happening. That sounds really simple, but when we explain that later on, what happens in sleep or the wake journey, changing the sense of place or shifting people away from their sense of place actually brings people into the deep. Yeah, so yeah, other tools, music, tactician being touch, olfaction being smell. You start to activate these different centers, and that can bring this about. Yeah, like you can bring about the stages. So stating these simple, stating the obvious here, just pointing out the fact that you need to bring about this pretense in people. Okay, how can I get people to sleep? How can I get people to sleep? Now, studying the sleep stages can be quite instrumental in that. These figures actually say a lot. Like, okay, they just look like pictures to us. They look like a bunch of squiggles and waves, but they're speaking like a story. So I'll study N1, N2 before maybe going into N3, and then let's study REM, just to find out, okay, what are you doing when you're journeying? What's happening in people's bodies when you're facilitating? Okay, and I hope you have your notebooks as well, because it does help to take notes at this point. Okay, let's talk about the music. What is the playlist doing? Like, why are you using music at all? What is the music doing? Um, okay, a lot of inner dance actually doesn't happen in the stages themselves. They're happening like in between the stages. They're happening in the transition points. So when you construct music, say this is music number 1, and then you move into music number 2, music number 3. Maybe you're using a musical instrument instead of a song, or you're using like something that creates noise. So that could be well true as well. Noise 1 to noise 2, or song 1 to song 2, song 3. The changes are happening like here. No, they're not happening in the song element. They're actually happening in the transition point. So the same would be true when you study the sleep stages that bring people into dream or psychedelic states. It's in the transition where the change is happening. So the transition then would be more visible or audible, depending if you're looking at it or listening to it in N2. Okay, so what's happening in N1 and N2? Say N1, N2. The feature here would be you're not yet as deep as you would be when you're in N3. N meaning non-REM 3. It's still easy to rouse you or wake you up. You're still easily disturbed by external sorry, wait, up. You're still easily disturbable by external sensory inputs. Either you're hearing like a noise, or there's maybe flashing lights outside, and it disturbs you. So when you're in N1 or N2, you're still negotiating sleep. So let's say if you were to study brain parts, this is when the thalamus needs to come up interesting. Okay, the thalamus is the sensory hub. That is one of its main functions, if not its most main function. It gates sensory input. So when you, let's say, hear something, or when you see something, or when you, let's say, feel something. I'm such a bad artist. It's a hand. um, it could be like pain, temperature. It could be pleasure, something nice. A lot of that still needs to pass through your thalamus. Even like your movements, your motor functions. There's gating happening in the thalamus. So before, like a lot of these enter the neocortex. So let's say what you hear eventually needs to get interpreted in the auditory cortex, the part of the brain that analyzes the sound. Everything that you see, it passes through the images pass through the thalamus, but before it actually becomes an image, it's just light, shapes, size, lines, geometries. Then the the visual cortex would then absorb it. Here, this one would be maybe the somatosensory cortex, and then motor functions would be like the premotor cortex. So the thalamus is quite interesting, and this isn't hard to think about. That when you go to sleep, the thalamus cannot be receiving all those inputs. Otherwise, it's really hard to sleep. So this is quite interesting. That when you use especially music, at what point are they not hearing the music as music anymore? Because when you're sleeping, right? When you're sleeping, suddenly loud sounds aren't waking you up anymore. And that's a feature of non-REM 3 and especially REM state. When you go into REM, it becomes harder to wake you up. It becomes more difficult to wake you, even if people try to rouse you, it takes like a long moment, and then you go back to non-REM 1 or non-REM 2 when your thalamus is open again. But when your thalamus is not gating, what you lose is basically a bi-directional function of the thalamus, where like sensory inputs from the outside, they're not functioning at certain stages in the sleep. But it doesn't mean the thalamus is turned off. The thalamus can actually still communicate internally with the hippocampus, which is maybe memory, the cortex, which is information processing, or the amygdala, which is emotions. You can still access those when you're sleeping, but you're not needing the bidirectional. Don't need to be disturbed by the outside world. So this is interesting, isn't it? Like when you're going into the journey, there's a point in which there could be people talking outside, or it doesn't bother you anymore. You lose that bidirectional feature. So when you are facilitating people, you kind of want to study that. Like, how do I artistically, spiritually, energetically find a way to let people undergo a shift? And for you to study that, like in the long term, you'd actually need to understand much more of the brain. That there are these aspects of the brain that either it's called it's very interesting. It's called the hypothalamic flip flop switch. And the switch basically triggers either wake or sleep. And from a group of neurons, it's like a zone, and the ventral lateral preoptic. These are very, very small zones in the hypothalamus, but they actually can trigger wake or sleep. Okay. Um, and there could be a switch there. Either sleep goes to wake, wake goes to sleep, depending on. So, for example, the tuberomammillary nucleus sends out this hormone called histamine. And for those who know allergenic drugs, an antihistamine will make you go sleepy because it starts to act on the histaminic or histaminergic parts of the brain that's keeping you awake. So when you need to wake up, you need to then send out histamine. But when you are needing to sleep, then you would send out GABA. GABA is inhibitory, so it puts you to bed. It slows down. It inhibits most of the neural activations that are happening. So this is something you would be interested in knowing, so that if you want people to go deep, then you would need to release GABA. You need to release some acetylcholine, melatonin in certain brain aspects, and you just need to be intuitive for now on how do I do that. Okay, so stages of sleep, I need to get them sleepy, so I start the journey slow, just so I can activate the slower brain states. So when that's happening, you're actually releasing GABA, melatonin, and then they're received at their corresponding receptors. So you're switching off and on. Okay, there's a bunch of off and on switches that you're conducting. And the more you become aware of this, you'd actually know what to do without anyone telling you what to do. You just start knowing how things operate. Okay, so the main point we're looking at now is you need to get people to sleep. So dim lighting, can't be too cold, can't be too hot. It needs to be just right. Called it the Goldilocks conditions. Like this isn't too hard the bed or too soft, or it isn't too hot, too cold. It's like what is just right? What can bring people into those definitive conditions where the sleep stages could begin, and lighting would have a lot to do with it. Now, don't be too anal or strict with lighting. Like dim lighting, lowering the lux levels of the lighting can help. But because people are going to close their eyes anyway, the parasympathetic nervous system would very much activate already. Just asking people to lay down, that's normally enough with the music. Like in our healing centers here in Palawan, we don't have walls normally, and it's very light outside. Now we do have walls, but in our old healing structures, we're always out in the open and the sun is out. So don't underestimate the power of the parasympathetic nervous system to bring about the stages of sleep. Whatever techniques, you might be saying certain things that are able to bring people into letting go states. Okay, so the movement from non-REM 1 to non-REM 2 is thus interesting. So do you remember when I showed you like the EEGs of N1 and N2? And N2 started to let's say show up these K complexes, or what's called like sleep spindles. Okay, so this is important. This is really, really interesting. What is that? Okay, so before you go into non-REM 3, which is let's signify it as like high amplitude, less frequencies. Spindles are important. Let's write that down just so we remember. Spindles are important. When people aren't experiencing spindles, people actually are not able to go into deep sleep. So spindles advance like deep sleep. So they're obviously doing something. So we would wonder, what are they doing? So if you remember the last calls that we had 2 weeks ago, we spoke about the like dopamine. If you remember, dopamine is sent out from the ventral tegmental area. The ventral tegmentum sends out dopamine. Now, the VTA is part of a much more complex structure called the reticular activating system. And if you don't want to say that whole thing, you can just say RAS. Technically, it's more specific called the ascending reticular activating system. Okay, so this is important. And I need to explain something first before this becomes important for you. Now, in the early sleep sciences, the scientists and researchers wanted to understand what part of the brain brings people into the sleep mode. Now, we know so much about this, particularly like when you study the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which would still be in the hypothalamus. The SCN is very sensitive to light. So when the light is bright, the SCN is not communicating to the pineal gland to send out melatonin, which brings about the dream state. It helps to bring about the dream state. So when it's dark and when it's not light, the pineal gland will then send out melatonin. So that's why light is quite important, but there could be other circadian rhythm techniques to activate the pineal gland system. That's what we know now. We know about photosensitive retinal ganglionic cells in the brain that absorbs light. That's not coming from the rods and cones. It's a very, very special photoreceptor. But in the beginning, scientists didn't know this. So they kept lesioning brain parts just to see, okay, if I cut this, if I lesion that, what would affect the sleep-wake cycle? And what affected the sleep-wake cycle initially that was noticed is part of the brain called the pons near the cerebellum. It's at the bottom of the brain. And initially that was already amazing that when the pons was lesioned, this went haywire. Like people were sleeping more there, and then people were awake around there. So there was something in the pons that seemed to affect the sleep-wake cycle. But when this was looked more deeply, the RAS became, or the ARAS became more implicated. Okay, so the ARAS is a whole bunch of systems that send out particular interesting neurotransmitters, especially that we would study in, no, that's not right. Neurotransmitters that we study in the inner dance that are also coming up hugely in the sleep wake cycle. Or I don't know if I talked about the healing process, but the healing process, the sleep wake, these are quite interesting to study. So serotonin is sent out by the dorsal raphe nucleus, and we would study today norepinephrine. So for those who know adrenaline or norepinephrine, this is interesting to study in REM state. And this is sent out to the locus ceruleus. And then we'd study acetylcholine. So I'm just bringing these up because these are very implicated in the hypothalamic flip-flop switch, like for you to turn on or turn off. Okay, for those who want to complete this, this is the pedunculopontine. Just keep trying to practice that pedunculopontine nucleus, or the parabrachial nucleus, sends out acetylcholine. For those who know acetylcholine, this is the neurotransmitter that is most responsible for activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So if you want to bring about resting and digesting in people, you want to activate the cholinergic or acetylcholine production and reception areas of the brain, and that would bring people closer to sleep states. So when the ARAS was damaged or lesioned in cats, in rats, in the fruit fly, not the fruit fly, but just mostly where experiments were happening in animals and then humans. This seems to have a lot to do with sleep wake. So when you conduct music in the process, you will either bring about a charge of these neurotransmitters and also other hormones that's going to be interesting in the long term, like the stress hormone, adrenaline. Depending on what you do, if you touch a certain part of the body, if you communicate through words, certain contexts, like you would start to release certain things, estrogen. But we're going to look at just the ARAS today. Okay, so let's simplify this because the terms can get bothersome or a little bit too complicated. What you need to understand more are the neurotransmitters, the chemicals. Okay, so what is interesting about this is when you go into REM sleep, there are basically only two chemicals that are reduced and almost in total disappearance. It's norepinephrine and serotonin. We need to talk about that today because it's quite definitive as to why or what REM is. Like why REM, how REM, what REM. Okay. This story about norepinephrine disappearing, serotonin levels going down. These are super significant. They're quite significant. So when you do study the inner dance, and maybe you guys have other words to call it, just call it inner dance. When you bring about REM or dream states, and when you're using music that's very activating, like high in frequency, fast in rhythm, it's possible that you would elevate serotonin levels and norepinephrine levels. And so when you do that, that could already make it interesting because sleep REM would have as a feature the absence of serotonin and norepinephrine, which do help in the wake states. Serotonin can help you to relax, but serotonin does modulate or tune wakefulness. So when serotonin levels go down, it becomes hard to go to sleep. Norepinephrine, as you well know, adrenaline or epinephrine keeps you awake. It keeps you energized. It allows you to work out problems that are present during the day. So for some reason, when you're sleep remming or sleep remembering, you take these out of the equation. You make them absent. So yeah, like there is a difference then between sleep and wake REM. And this is not the only difference. Like the other difference that we would need to look at is in REM, there's paralysis, right? What is called atonia in REM sleep. Like your body needs to become paralyzed when you're sleeping. But why is it that when you're wake REMing, your body is moving? Like in the inner dance, your body is often moving. Sometimes it's not moving, but often it's moving. So you're going into dream states with your body moving, and it's actually doing interesting stuff. Okay, like atonia is a technology that your body had to learn. The whole species, entire species, have to learn atonia because it's very hard to be dreaming while your body is moving. So there has to be um, an atonia, like catatonia, when you're sleeping. And okay, let's compare that to non-REM sleep. Okay, in non-REM sleep, your body actually is not paralyzed. It's not paralyzed. The body is not paralyzed, but okay, not paralyzed, but for some reason you're not acting out your dreams. You are sometimes dreaming in non-REM as well. It's just maybe not as vibrant as the kind of dreams that happens in REM state. Here in REM, you are paralyzed, but you are actually um, sorry, you're not acting out. When you're going to sleep, you're actually activating the motor cortex. Okay. So here in non-REM, you're not activating your motor cortex, but you're also not paralyzed. So if you wanted to act it out, you can, but you're not acting out. You're not activating your motor cortex. Here, you're paralyzed, but when you're dreaming, you're actually using your motor cortex. Do you find that interesting? That you're moving through the space through your imagination. Like while you're dreaming, you're paralyzed from head down, but you are in fact using your movements. You're dreaming that you're moving through the space. And when you're not in REM, paralysis is not so featured, but you're not activating your motor cortex. So I want you to study that, because in wake REM, in inner dance dreaming, you're actually able to enter REM state while moving. And that moves emotions, that moves thoughts, that moves many things. So, okay, when you start to enter into non-REM 2, let's say we still need this, so let's not make that disappear. Let's just move it away. When you're starting to go to sleep and the spindles come, a lot of these spindles actually come out of the ARAS, or the ascending reticular activating system. From these areas, it's sending up dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, acetylcholine, maybe glutamate, maybe GABA. And understanding that you actually need these spindles, right, to go into deep sleep. Now, deep sleep is when you go closer to delta and maybe some theta, but it would be prominently delta. I'd like to bring an understanding of what's happening here. So let's say you were awake, and symbolically, maybe a lot of frequencies, not really high in amplitude. Here, it would be less frequencies. Maybe this is theta. I want you to understand the relationship between, let's say, non-REM 1 and non-REM 2. No, the middle ground. It's the middle space between non-REM 1 and non-REM 2. So in one way of looking at it, there's the sleep spindles are, in fact, I would call them like negotiations or transactions between like this one and sorry, and this one. The spindles are the negotiations. It's like a push and pull. It's like, okay, I still want to stay awake, but I need to go into deep sleep. So as they negotiate with each other, these spindles especially are transactions. It's like the becoming delta of what was, let's call it beta. All right. In like when you're awake, you're in beta, and here beta is mixing up with a little bit of theta. Wait, that looks like a cross. Theta, beta and theta waves, so that this becomes more theta, and then this slows down into delta. So on the way to becoming delta, it needs to mix up with theta. So this would be useful for those who are playlisting. You start out with delta here, and then maybe you climb up to theta a little bit, which is here, right? And then maybe you climb up to some beta, because there is some beta still lingering here in non-REM 1. Now, when you're in non-REM 1 stage of sleep, there's a part of you that's actually still awake. It's still easy to wake you up. At the same time, there are still brain parts that are activated that are normal in the wake states. Like one of those would be the default mode network, which is important in like thinking without thinking. Like self-reflection happens in the default mode network. You know, like when you're not thinking, but you're thinking, you're often thinking biographically. You're thinking about yourself, like your image, like how people see you, like how you're doing. You know, when you're not thinking, but you're thinking, the default mode network is on when you're off. And the default mode network extends in N1 and a little bit into N2. So you start to let go or to shut down the default mode network, and it's the spindles. You can think of the spindles as small release mechanisms that are happening to allow you to, let's say, fully surrender. Remember, like N3 stage, which is also called slow wave sleep. This is as close as you would get to death, like in the last call. Like I saw Katarina in this call, like the Greek god Hypnos is the god of sleep, and he is the son of Nyx, and Erebus is darkness, next is night. And the brother of Hypnos is actually the god of death. It's Thanatos. And the son of Hypnos is Morpheus. So it would be N3 that brings Hypnos close to Thanatos. SWS, or slow wave sleep, is close to death. So for you to go into this death-like slumber, the spindles allow you to let go. And the key brain wave that shows up here, which we would study or talk about mostly today, is like theta waves. Like a lot of theta waves start to negotiate beta and delta. You see, to die, you need to go into delta. You know, like when you're actually awake. So let's say you're experiencing. So this is sleep, and when you're awake and you would like to relax, let's say to be daydreaming, you would go into theta. The middle ground would be alpha. It would be the alpha state. So let's say you're awake and you close your eyes. You start to emit theta energy, and what would be the middle ground. This is entering into a domain of study called neural frequency coupling. When you mix a higher frequency with a lower frequency, there's a gating mechanism somewhere in the middle. You actually construct like a wave in between. So in a way, um, some of these brain states or neural oscillations that's in between, they're actually just combinations of higher and lower frequencies. They're synchronizations of higher and lower frequencies. And through that, the deeper you go, you can actually then activate the even higher frequencies, which are not always as possible when you're awake. So this is just a 101 on how synchronizations of neural oscillations work. So this is what you're negotiating. So when you study playlisting, there is a reason then why, let's say, you would start, let's say, slow here, right? And then you would go high. Let's say 5 or 10 minutes into the process, you raise the vibration, and then you, oops, sorry, and then you lower it again here in slow wave sleep stage, like right here. And when you do that, you start to mix things up. You start to construct like third waves, like the waves in between. Okay. And it's the spindles initially that's doing that. The spindles are quite important. For the reason being that if your goal is to bring people into like the REM state, they can't go into that without going first into N1. And then you need to go into N2. Like you can't get excited to, okay, I want people to dream right away. Let me have dreamy music. Actually need to go through a whole journey process. Need to go through the stages. Need to be patient, right? You need to be systematic. Coming from wake and then going to N1, N2, N3. So what you're doing is you're anticipating, knowing that you will bring them into N3. The N3 would be like the delta drop. When you're conducting a playlist, that's when you drop. So don't forget to drop. A lot of people, they don't understand that you need to drop the process here, like here, N3. Don't get excited on making the energy go up. Oops, sorry. Making the energy go up and up so fast. You need to achieve the wave that happens when we are dreaming. Drop the energy here, maybe 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes into the 60 to 90-minute process, drop it. Drop it there, depending on how long the process is. Drop it, and that would mimic the slow wave sleep state. The inner dance plays has always done that, so you can achieve like an effective REM state. Okay. So yeah, I think I was talking about the spindles. People who don't experience spindles, actually, when they go into REM state, there's less integration at work. There's less synthesis of information. Spindles advance deep sleep and they allow for quicker sleep onset. When people aren't experiencing spindles so much in their sleep, you actually go through frequent awakenings. Um, for one, it becomes harder to go into non-REM sleep, but at the same time, you wake up more through the night. You wake up at 12 o'clock, midnight, you wake up at 2 a.m. again, 3 a.m. because you didn't get the spindles. So that's why the sleep playlist is actually helping a lot of people. So this is helpful when you're playlisting as well. Stating that, let's say, you consider this like a stage, like here, and then you consider this a stage, but it's the space in between. Because let's say you anticipated, so you say you went here and you went here. The space in between are the spindles themselves. N1 becoming N2, K complex would come out, spindles would come out, and then N2 to N3, N2 wanting to become N3, the spindles would also still come out. So spindles are in the middle. All right. So something interesting that happens in this aspect is when you're sleeping, something that actually does happen is core body temperature. Okay, temperature, warm and cold, it could actually spike up a little bit when you first go to sleep. So when you are facilitating people, don't be surprised when bodies start to get warm or incredibly hot even. Okay. This is to say a lot of people who undergo deep processes, to be honest, they're actually very often sleep deprived. They haven't been sleeping well. They've been going through hard times. When I conduct trainings, people fly from other countries and they have like jet lag. So when you're sleep deprived, there's something called sleep pressure. It could be the buildup of adenosine, melatonin wanting to become released. When they then lay down, they would have like an explosive experience because let's say they were staying up for too long because they're problematic. When you live in a city, you're often sleep deprived because of artificial lighting. In the last call, we talked about how in the advent of street lamps in London, they started to report this particular thing that wasn't so well known in the past. It's called insomnia. People stopped sleeping right when we advanced into cheap and available lighting. So because of that, a lot of humans are sleep deprived and they're lacking REM sleep state. There's a lot of sleep pressure that's high. So there's this tendency for the energy to want to just let go, to release, to experience not just REM. People are lacking non-REM 3. So just giving them the opportunity to lay down, in fact, into dream state, you're serving them quite a bit. And you're not just healing like individual people. This is the culture. We are a culture of insomniacs, especially for those who live in big cities. Sleep deprivation is just quite common. But this is to help you to understand that sleep deprivation started when the Industrial Revolution came and um, artificial lighting came through. So um, this means that a lot of people, when they're sleep deprived, their energy doesn't look like this. Core body temperature starts to rise up. And a big part of that is actually stress levels. When stress levels go high, cortisol levels go up, core body temperature goes up. So partly what people are needing to do is to drop temperature levels. And for that's the reason why when people lay down, temperature goes up and then it goes down. It goes up and then it goes down. Like one common sharing people would say is when the activation comes, their body would feel cold. the Divine Mother, I would always say, feels cold. It's actually because heat is leaving the body. So in fact, like when you touch the body, it might actually feel hot, but for the participant, they're feeling cold. So then you'd put like, let's say, a blanket there or give them some kind of warmth. Just holding their bodies would be a very supportive structure for them. So core body temperature is such a big deal in circadian rhythm science. So bringing this up again, or let's say, let's look for other, no, let's just look at this. We're affecting core body temperature. Okay, so there's a particular rhythm of core body temperature that goes up and down for many people, but this is actually getting disturbed in many, so that when core body temperature isn't dropping when people are sleeping, that's when not REM sleep isn't happening so much. This is when people get problematic or overworked, overstressed. So that's what sleep deprivation actually looks like from the point of view of hot and cold. So something then happens when let's go back to the aras. When you first go into the first stages of sleep, let's say non-REM 1 and non-REM 2, one interesting finding that's quite recent is to do with cerebral blood flow. Okay, now what is it saying? Like there's a lot of blood sent into certain particular interesting brain parts, and we could talk about, let's say, the thalamus, could be the cortex, but there's a lot that enters the hippocampus. Now, this is a little bit strange because when you bring a lot of blood flow to certain body parts, it actually uses up a lot of energy. So cerebral blood flow raising up is very expensive for the body. But for some reason, the hippocampus becomes like a key feature for that. So I want to talk about the hippocampus a little bit here. Why is it heating up beyond like certain other body parts? Okay, and hippocampus is responsible for remembrance. It's the memory center. So this is to say, when you're dreaming, you are actually remembering, but you're also forgetting. Okay, you're clearing up the hippocampus, but you're also activating it in certain ways. So that's it about the cerebral blood flow. Okay, so let's talk about the hippocampus now. Let's clean this up. All of that was actually just to preempt talk about the hippocampus. Now, I talked about the thalamus, right? The sensory hub. Now, the thalamus, if you remember the last Zoom call, we spoke a lot about the amygdala, which is responsible for emotion. Now, the amygdala needs to quiet down in the sleep process. You can't be too emotional when you're sleeping. So the amygdala does have inputs into the thalamus, and when you're angry, it becomes hard to go to sleep because then the thalamus isn't able to activate the hypothalamus and also the hippocampus to quiet down. Hypothalamus would be responsible for autonomic nervous system functions, endocrine functions, limbic functions. The hippocampus would be responsible for memory. Okay, so remember that cerebral blood flow rushes or surges into the thalamus and the hippocampus. What this is telling us, and the hippocampus is actually where much of the theta, this is where it starts to make sense to you, why we're even talking about this. This is where a lot of the theta frequencies emerge from in the brain. The hippocampus is almost the exclusive region where theta is almost always featured. If theta starts to show up in, let's say, the left frontal cortex, too much theta when you're awake in the in the left frontal cortex would lead to what's called ADD or ADHD. When you're having a hard time paying attention. Kids don't have a problem with having theta in that part of the brain. They can handle theta. They don't have to lose attention. But when adults experience theta in the left frontal cortex, then okay. So, but theta is featured a lot in the hippocampus, and the hippocampus extends into the entorhinal cortex. These are parts of the brain still responsible for memory. Okay, memory could be in the hippocampus or the entorhinal cortex. And theta actually helps to gate memory functions. So this is to say that when theta starts to appear in N1 and in especially N2, and then has residues in N3, one of the key functions for N2 and N3 is called memory consolidation. So, like you experience all of these things during the day, during wake. You were experiencing these moments, these events, these episodes in the day. You have to process that. And if you don't give your brain, body, mind the chance to process that, that's when you just start to get old and to die and to get sick. So in order to digest a lot of that, you need the theta waves actually hold a huge part in consolidating memory. So whether you're awake or sleeping, even when you're awake, if you relax, okay, when you relax and you're kind of drowsy, you're actually processing your memories, like in a way, you're consolidating memories. So maybe some short-term memories are shifting into long-term memories. One thing happening in N1 and N2 is you're actually tagging memories. So tagging is a process of determining, okay, that was important. Okay, that one, don't like that so much. That's not so interesting, but that one's important. And when you go into REM state, this is when you start to make use of some of the things that were interesting, right? So that when you're dreaming, there are certain things that do come up that were maybe prominent during the day, or let's say last week or last year, because they were tagged in N1 and N2. And that's what theta does. So why am I talking about this in an inner dance training? When you conduct this playlisting work, it's actually really important that you give the space for consolidation, synthesis, and integration. So if it's too much, too fast, too much, like all the time, then you're not giving a chance for like this to happen. So you do need to slow down at certain points. So let's say you're designing a playlist, people are coming from wake. What's interesting here is to get people to go deep. You need to liven things up a bit. So you do raise the energy here, right? And then and then you drop them here at N3. It's in the transitions. Once again, it's in the transitions from slow to fast, and then slow again, where the changes come. So go slow again after you go fast. And this is not just the music, it could be like the words you're using. It's just you knowing the energy construct so that you can guide people through these stages. So okay, let's go more into the hippocampus, because it's like an interesting brain part. So who's interested in memory anyway? Like memory is incredible. Like a lot of people might want to forget. It's like, I want to forget my problems. I want to forget my ego. But if you totally do that, then you're just walking around with amnesia. And I really do know a lot of people who went so deep in energy, they actually lose their memory. They don't remember things anymore. And that's not always good. So back to the hippocampus in that way. Don't forget. Don't forget sometimes we actually forget to remember. That's birth, right? You have to forget everything in order to remember, and you have to enjoy remembering. So what's interesting about the hippocampus is it's actually the convergence for time and space. And it's not long ago when scientists began to understand what is the structure and the function of the hippocampus. Without going too deep into um, the anatomy of the hippocampus, let's just begin to understand what it does in terms of time and space. So let's start with space. So the hippocampus deals with placement. So remember, we talked about how in the process of going deep, you need to displace people. So what is responsible for placing people is the hippocampus. So the hippocampus consists of place cells. There are other cells as well. It's like head direction. So you can experiment with this, like changing the direction the head is facing can actually shift perception. Let's say they're laying down and then you shift their head just a little bit to the left or to the right, it would change the experience. And a lot of that is hippocampal in nature. You would activate the head direction cells. Um, the hippocampus also has like time cells. And this is to say, in the last call, we looked at the circadian clock, which is around the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Right now, I want to focus on the hippocampal clock. The hippocampus is actually a clock as well, and it plays a really important role in like creating or holding rhythmicity. Okay, like small rhythms that allow you to coordinate or sequence events in the day. So start here first. Okay, this is a really cool discovery in the neurosciences, the hippocampus neuroscience, where say, imagine, let's say a map. Say this could be your soul, this could be the earth, this could be your room. When you, let's say, go into different points in the map, okay, maybe let's just look for points. Okay, this is that part of your room. And this is that part of your room. That's the other part of your room. And then you have all these parts of your room that you might call your mind, your life, your office, your house, your bathroom. So when you go into particular parts of your room, you would activate these like place cells. And like in the work that we do, what's more important is movement. Like when the body is moving, what does that actually mean? It's actually like a GPS system. You would navigate from one place cell to another, and that could be like a neuron or a group of neurons. Okay, like let's say you move from here to here, there has to be a way to activate um different areas. So when isn't that interesting? Like everything, everywhere you've been to, everything that you've seen is actually mapped out. Like there's a whole map. I love that word, when people go to trainings, they're like, I want to understand the map. Like, why do I touch a particular body part? Why are you doing that? Like, it's because of a map. And there are multiple maps. The hippocampal map would be quite basic and interesting. So the map doesn't need to just be places. Like there could be maps around frequencies, like faces that you recognize. A lot of that is mapped out in your memory banks. There's like a kind of memory map. So you want to thank your hippocampus and your entorhinal cortex for allowing you to make your way to the shopping mall, and then maybe here's like the bank, maybe that's like the market, this is like the church, and it just goes on and on. It's like, okay, you can navigate. But something else that needs to happen here for this to even make sense is there has to be a relationship between space and time. So one of the functions of the hippocampus is in okay, so here are your, let's say, your points, the parts of your map. For this to make sense, there has to be a sequencing function. So let's say they can't just all happen at the same time. It wouldn't make sense if, let's say, this is on top of that, and then this is on top of that, and this is on top of that. It wouldn't make sense if this is what your mind looked like. It's like, okay, that's what my mind looks like. They need to sequence somehow. So the hippocampus does that, and you know how it does that? It's actually quite interesting. It does that through theta phase locking. It's a mechanism. Like, that's what brain states can do. That's what brainwaves are. It's amazing. That's what brainwaves do. Like in the peaks and in the low points, the troughs, the peak, the trough, the peak, the trough. This is when, let's say, remember these dots, these placements. So let's maybe remove the numbers. These could be like the placements. So when you're in this place, this would activate, but they would look more like this is called rates. Okay, these small waves, these mini waves within the big waves would be that's called rate coding, and phase coding would be like these bigger, these bigger waves that gate the smaller waves. Okay, so you might then understand, okay, these are like the faster waves. Might see these as like gamma waves. And then these lower waves would be theta or delta. Do you see what waves do? The bigger waves actually contain the smaller waves, and these faster waves hold like a lot more information than the slower waves. But it's the slower waves that allows you to organize all that information. You might have like gazillions of synapses. You have so many synaptic connections, but for you to be able to make sense of that, there needs to be an organizational element, and that's what waves do. They're not just brain states. They're not just waves. They hold a function of synchronizing like a ton of information. Like, so much information needs to sync with each other, and all of that is happening here, like in the hippocampus. I don't know why they call it a hippocampus. I think it's something to do with like the seahorse. Okay, so one interesting finding, because we are talking about sleep, is okay, now that we brought up like the place cells, what interests scientists is that when let's say when you go to sleep, what is interesting is that there is a what is called a reverberation. This is the word. Reverb is a musical word. Reverberation is a sleep science word that simply states that when you're sleeping, you actually reverberate the same place cells that were lit up when you were awake. Okay, there's like a residue or a reverberation, and a lot of that reverberation is happening more in the like in N1 and N2. No, not in N1, in N2 and N3, where memory consolidation is happening. Okay, electrical reverberation is especially greatest during like non-REM 3. In REM, it becomes maybe more variable, and this is because REM actually negotiates. Let's say this is what you experience during the day, but REM needs to make space for new insights, new possibilities. So let's say in the old, let's say you're still thinking about the day. It's like, why did I do that? How awful, how horrible of me, or why did they do that to me? That's the old. But then the brain would need to look for, okay, but maybe there's another way of looking at it. Maybe there are possibilities there, and you're not able to see that when you're awake. So one of the reasons why you're sleeping is to actually make new, a lot of those experiences that are stale, that are like horrible, that's like you want to redo them. REM state allows you to happen. So reverberate, where is that? Reverberation does hold a key there. Um, yeah, so this wave actually talks about transformation already. The story of transformation is in this theta wave experience. I'm defining dream and the spiritual state for you. Okay, understanding that in REM state there is a co-activation of theta and gamma states. There could be some beta, some alpha, but there would be a feature of very fast frequencies, higher vibrations being gated by slower ones. Um, Later on, we might talk about a neurological concept called long-term potentiation and depression. Um, this is an understanding of the theta wave that's coming into the sciences right now. That when you like prime or activate like a certain event, like in the peak, let's say this is the peak, this is the trough, the low point, this is the peak, this is the trough. When an activation happens at the peak, at that state, it's actually easier to construct a change. It's called long-term potentiation. You can activate change a lot easier. And here at the bottom, this is where hyperpolarization is taking place. This is called depolarization. This is called hyperpolarization. Okay, if you're trying to wonder what are we talking about, we're talking about how neurons fire, and when you fire, you wire. That's how you create a connection. If you want to create a new knowledge, you have to fire certain patterns. And right now, you are listening to me, you're firing certain patterns. So the opposite of long-term potentiation is long-term depression. So what I'm explaining to you here in gist is in the hippocampus region and in many other parts of the brain, there's sometimes potentiation or depression. This would explain why change would happen. Like if there are certain things that you want to deactivate, you need to achieve LTD, long-term depression. If you want to create a new pattern, then you need to potentiate, you need to activate LTP mechanisms. And to be honest with you, music can do that. Music can either depress or music can either potentiate. It can excite or it can inhibit. And you need to do that in stages. Like normally you need to do both. There has to be excitatory and inhibitory impulses. Too much excitement, then you don't have enough depression. Too much depression, then you don't have the excitatory impulses. So there's always a balancing out. And a lot of that is happening actually still in the ascending reticular activating system. What would be responsible for that would be dopamine, epinephrine, serotonin, acetylcholine, and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is incredible. Like for you to understand what the hippocampus does. So okay, so let's clean up. Remembering, right, that there's the slow and the fast. That you're oops, gamma can stay. The slow and the fast. Maybe we don't need the brain state. Let's just say the high and the low, the slow and the fast. The fast is regarding space. That's where excitatory elements are like when you tend to quicken things, that has more to do with space, and you slow things down, and that has to do with time. So timing here is about sequencing, and space is more about there's instantaneity there, where all these different all these different where's the I erased them. Oh, here. Uh, okay, all of these things are happening at the same time, and it wouldn't make sense without timing. So, it's the slow wave. Remember, the slow wave is called phasing, the phase coding, and then rate coding would be the faster waves. So let's say you have a lot of information like scattered here, which are different place cells activating. So what you're doing when you're dreaming, or you can also do it when you're awake, is you are phasing is about sequencing. So placing a particular order of events does happen in the playlisting process. This would explain why you are ordering, let's say, remember, like song number 1, song number 2, song number 3, number 4. That is why you can't have the session one on top of each other. The session can't just be one energy. It has to be as many as 12 or 5 or 10, because you're teaching the brain to sequence, which is still a feature of dreaming. So especially when you've achieved like the REM state here, because you've slowed things down, sped things up, slowed it down, then sped it up while there's slowness there. REM state is more understandable here as now it's clear to you. It's like let's say delta, theta, gamma, some beta, like high beta. You remember like a cerebral blood flow when you're having these bursts, like the highest bursts would be as fast as 150 hertz. This is very, very fast. Delta would be as low as 2 or 3 hertz, let's say. Theta would be maybe 8. It's between 4 to 12 hertz. So it could average at maybe 8 hertz, very slow. But the more you're able to hold slow, the more you're actually able to hold higher frequencies. So when you are designing your music, don't be scared to look for very, very high frequency music. We'll talk more about that in succeeding calls later on. But that needs to be coupled with very, very slow music. So when a lot of people are using like a music that might be somewhere in the middle, beta might be somewhere in between, let's say 12, 12 to 30. Yeah, like it doesn't go high enough sometimes. That brings about this dream within dream dimensional spaces. That's when things do tend to get like emotional, which some people need. But if you want to transcend emotion, you would actually want to go into higher brain states, and that's what REM state is doing. So that when you're bringing emotionality about, in many ways, you're actually still reenacting. Sorry, you're still reenacting N1 and some N2. If you don't, let's say, pass through N3 stage properly, if that's lacking in people's bodies, and then when you're not holding like super deep and super high, you're still in the middle. Even if people's bodies are moving, people are shaking, they're crying, you're still actually enacting N1 and 2 stages. So that's something the circadian or sleep stage models could teach us. Okay, so having looked at this, let's go into some deeper understandings on dream. I think we're done with this. I think this should have been interesting for a lot of you. Sequencing or phase locking or phase coding isn't something you need to think about so much. Your brain is doing it internally. Okay, this is just to say when you expose people to fast and slow music, your brain is going to construct like a combination of these, and that would be the point in between. That's called neural or cross frequency coupling. And I had just described it to you. It's basically when slow, this is slow, and then fast, this would be fast. It's too thick. These would be like fast waves. Okay, there'd be fast waves there. That's how dreaming occurs, and that's neural frequency coupling. So what you do is when you expose people to fast or high and slow and or low, uh your brain will construct like a what's happening? Your brain's constructing like a wave that's both fast and slow, like in the middle. So let's say this is super fast and this is slow. Your brain will construct a fast, slow brain state, and this is what it looks like when it is coupled. And the sleep spindles help with that. So this is the reason why we when we conduct the processes, we're not just using slow music or fast music. We're helping the brain to do phase coding and rate coding. Like that's fast and slow together. Okay. So let's look at why dream. Like, what's the point? In another perspective, dream. I want to go back to. I want to go back to norepinephrine and serotonin. So it's been asked. This has been found out like some decades ago already. It's not new, but it's still kind of a mystery. Why norepinephrine needs to go down? Why serotonin needs to go down? Now the theories would be as such. Norepinephrine helps to activate action, especially when you are needing to really experience like alertness. Let's say alertness. Actually, this is shouldn't be a mystery. Like when you're dreaming, you shouldn't be alert. Serotonin would be more mysterious. Serotonin helps a little bit to achieve alertness through the modulation of alertness, but serotonin is responsible for bonding. It actually helps with attachment levels. Like for those who do psychedelics, you know the drug like MDMA. How do people act out when they're in ecstasy? They really go into love, love, happy, happy, joy, joy, right? Because serotonin levels are released, and serotonin does have responsibilities for happiness levels. So already it should be a mystery for you. When I'm dreaming, dreaming is supposed to be a good thing. Why am I not needing serotonin? Why is there like a crossing out of serotonin when we are sleeping? It has to do with how to access gamma states. So since we're on the subject of psychedelics, if you study what LSD does, LSD actually blocks serotonin receptors. It starts to enter receptor serotonergic receptors, and serotonin can't go in. It sort of blocks serotonin in that way, and that's when the world becomes really, really like weird. It becomes bizarre. The world becomes strange, right? On an LSD experience, not as much in an MDMA experience, but LSD does that, and it's actually just repeating something that you're conducting when you're dreaming. Because when you're dreaming, dreams are not supposed to be normal. Like for dreams to be dreams, they usually have this feature of being weird. So what does serotonin have to do with that, according to neuro theories? So what serotonin does is it binds, let's say, let's call this, let's say, a neuron, a neuron, a neuron. It helps to bind certain neurons so that they can lock onto each other. And remember, like memory, concept of memory and reverberation. For you to either lengthen, let's say there's a neuron here, serotonin doesn't really allow you the let's say you're expending energy to make these connections here, connections here. But you needed like neurons way over here. That would expend like a lot of energy. So for you to do that, serotonin levels need to go down so that attachment levels would also go out the window. Because then there are certain things that you may need to see that's in the horizon, meaning like super far away. So this is one of the reasons why serotonin levels go down. Like this is like the bizarre zone. Let's call that the twilight zone, the weird zone. And usually it's in the bizarre zone where like insights, creativity, like this is where they're hiding. And the ones that are near to you, these are the ones that are like familiar. I bound these through long-term potentiation. I've wired these because I kept firing them. So if you want to widen your mind, open your mind, widen your horizon, and access all these other weird things, this is one of the reasons why serotonin goes down. So a very useful concept that we've always brought up in the inner dance is to do with the networks. Now there are different types of networks, and one of the most important networks when you are searching for wisdom is the semantic network. Semantics means meaning itself. Meaning. So inside your brain, you actually have a map as well. This is like a network of words, concepts, ideas, information. It's all mapped there in a simultaneous instantaneity. Everything coexists at the same time in your network. Now, that's not your only network. You also have the iconic network, which is all the images that you've ever seen. And then you also have the echoic network, which should be all the sounds and frequencies that you've ever heard. No, not a question mark, just an ear. Are mapped out actually like in a whole universe that's comprising of your mind, body, spirit. Okay, so when your serotonin levels are high and your norepinephrine levels are high, let's say you're alert and you are trying to act out. So let's say in serotonin, let's say this is about like information, and then you need to act out the information. So both of these you can see need to shut down in REM state, primarily because if you want a wider set of possibilities, priming needs to be when you okay, priming means either direct priming or hyper priming. So direct priming means you're logical, you are computational, you're making sense. And hyper priming is like you're not making sense. You might be irrational, but at the same time, you might be reaching levels of genius, artistry. That's when you're becoming creative, where you're able to make more connections. So the difference between, let's say, convergent thinking is, let's say you have these memories, and they would converge into like a one thing, which looks nice and beautiful and symmetrical. But a divergent thinking mode could very well be that the middle would be the uh this could be the memory, and then you could instead perceive many answers coming out from one particular detail or one memory. So I think that's divergent thinking, where like you see a one thing, you see many possibilities, as opposed to the opposite, where the memory is a convergence of all the other the answer is a convergence of all the other meanings. So it's up to you. This is what REM state would look like. And there's a particular research by I've had this book for a while. I picked it up again because of the topic that we're talking about. It's written by is it Robert Stickgold, and he conducted a very interesting experiment. And the paper, I think, has been quoted um, quite often. It was in 1999. So what Robert Stickgold would do is he would wake people up who would be in different stages of either when they're in REM sleep, non-REM sleep, and also he would do these experimentations when they're awake. Now, what is interesting is, okay, how does direct priming or hyperpriming work? So let's say I say the word like red, and then if I'm talking to you, maybe you're thinking of either like a this, or like a fire truck is something you think about, or you think about blood. So priming has to do with associations. And when you're direct priming, associations are usually strong. So when I say red, you're thinking of that. When you go hyper priming, you're able to access weak associations. So let's say I say red, and then you suddenly think about it's like in the dream. Maybe you're thinking about like a lemon, or like uh, a rainbow, or you're thinking about like God, like or whatever it is, to like the sea, things that have nothing to do with red start to activate, which in your wake state normally would not, because it's not efficient to have weak associations. So in the study by Robert Stickold, what he found out is when people are in REM sleep, direct priming drops by like by 90%, and hyper priming increases twofold. Okay, it's like times two. So this is one of the reasons why we are also going into REM sleep. Like there are scores of stories of amazing thinkers like Einstein or Da Vinci. They would actually wake themselves up during different periods of the night. And when they do, that's when they start to find solutions that were not available when they were awake, when they were direct priming, when associations are strong. So it might seem like smart people have strong associations, but people going into psychosis, schizophrenia, people going into spiritual states, they're actually accessing dream states. And in those dream states, there might be world changing solutions that we're not seeing when we're thinking too much in the normal way of thinking. There might be other ways of thinking, like REM thinking, that's interesting. So that's what dreaming means, and this should like inspire you when you construct a playlist, that when you do try to achieve a REM experience, and you do have so many things at your disposal. You have so many tools, like what kinds of music would activate creativity, understanding that there is a journey people still need to pass through in order to kind of get there. Um, like uh, I think what we're talking about here specifically is um, serotonin, like too emotional actually like blocks wisdom centers. When you look at it from a neurological perspective, you're too emotional, too too much of the amygdala will not allow you to see very far. So there would be certain points where you need to also drop the emotional trigger mechanisms, which a lot of facilitators really like to go for. And the much too enervating ones as well are very norepinephrinergic. If I was to make up a term, you also want to let go of that at certain points if you really do want to achieve an authentic REM state, which allows people to dream like awake, right? So that's why we're kind of bringing this up. Um, this still has to do with like a theta processing. So let's say when you are awake, um, remember like theta helps time and space coding. through number one, like accessing the place cells, and at the same time then learning to sequence. Now, when you are awake, sequencing is externally generated. So I don't know how you're going to use this information that I'm about to give, but when you're dreaming, the sequence can be internally generated. So still accessing the fact that theta waves are emitting from the hippocampus. Um, when you're dreaming, let's say talking about like the semantic network, one of the things that you're doing when you're dreaming is you're actually creating new sequences. Um, you might be looking at new information, but a lot of the information is actually quite old. It might be from when you were 3 years old, 12 years old. So one way of understanding how transformation works is when you give a person the power to generate the sequence. So sequence involves time. You're not here just to let go of time. You're here to bring people back into history, but in a way that empowers them, helping them to sequence the information well. So looking back at the playlist, then you would experience maybe a different theta over here when you drop things down again in the 12 stages. This would be stage number 10, or you give people enough time here in the ending. You start slow, you end slow. You still bring about like relaxing delta theta music, like in the end. You are giving people the where am I? You're allowing people to sequence events in a way that sequence allows for stories to unfold. So in many ways, a lot of people will come to us because they're tired of the old story. For them to shift into like a new story, story is okay then. Like it's okay to still be in the story. It's just it often needs to be a new story if it's going to be like a coming from the dream state. Okay, so I'm going to end this now. I've been talking my head off. I've actually been doing it for 2 hours, which I normally don't. um, we don't need to remember the dream, right? We can, but even when we don't, either in wake or sleep, uh, it's enough right now to understand that the brain is choosing the associations that it needs, either in sleep or wake. All the important work is being done. Even when we're sleeping, the associations are being discovered, explored, and evaluated. It's just that you're not always aware, but you can trust it, that there is a consciousness there. And when you're there, there's a lot of newness that's coming about there. So when you do experience like wake dream, what you're realizing, going back to what Freud said, dreams are like stars. They're always there, but we can only see them at night. Talking about circadian rhythmicity, something humans did when we invented like artificial lighting, we're pushing away because we're scared of it. We're pushing away the darkness. When we journey into the inner dance, we are teaching people and ourselves to not be scared of the dark, because in the dark, there's actually like a lot of light. And so if you learn to dream awake, you would realize that there are actually so many dreams there that we can see, even during the day. And one of the reasons why we are like studying together and experiencing together why we're doing this work is we are interested in how does this whole thing work? How are we dreaming of a universe or an earth or a life? These are the mechanisms. So I hope that you enjoyed this call, that it is useful for you. I would like you to get interested in your sleep. to wake up in your sleep? Like, what would that be like? To also understand that the work that we're doing is waking up sleep. Like, that's such a deep question. What if you woke up while you were sleeping and you were still sleeping, but you were awake? You would see the universe, and it would be awesome. So I hope you're interested in the gifts that sleep can bring us. It's a new consciousness that's actually an old consciousness. Um, so I'd be interested if you have any questions, ideas, insights, resonances as well, like things that are starting to make sense from your dreams or your journeys, your sessions. Let's spend the remaining time a little, 40 minutes just about to see if you guys have things jotted down in your notebooks. Thank you for listening.
Well, hi. It's been too much information. I would like to settle down so much, but in a way, I usually didn't remember my dreams. Now, after my journey in Maya, I've been dreaming a lot, but still, I know I'm dreaming. Because I wake up in a different way, but I still don't remember with detail. The only thing is that I become like knowing what to do regarding my dreams, but not remember every detail. It's very strange. It's like receiving some information that I have to, and then I just do it, and I think I'm being more resolutive. I'm doing things in better sequences. My time is I have more time of everything. I know it's very interesting.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
Benedict.
Hi, thanks a lot. Super, super interesting. I was sitting on the edge of my chair to take it all in. I have a question. I don't know if it's even related then to today, but well, since forever, and especially since my burnout, I can sometimes wake up after, I think maybe it's one sleep cycle. It's like 3-4 hours, and then I would be like feeling like it's morning. I would be completely awake, and since the playlist, I can put a sleep playlist and then go back to sleep. I noticed that it is when my nervous system is too activated. So I guess that's the norepinephrine that avoids me to get back to sleep, which is helped by the sleep playlist. Well, this is the reasoning. I don't know if it's right. But then lately I've noticed, I think it's been like 6 months that I've been using the sleep playlist very intensively. And I've noticed that now when I'm like in this a bit hyper excited state, the sleep playlists work less well. So I wondered, is this because my brain starts to be somehow like adapted, like in this dopamine kind of way, that there's maybe the expectation or just a kind of desensitization? Because what I now do when I have this state, I put on a non-sleep playlist. And even if I have, I have some triggers in the beginning, like, oh my God, what's happening? It actually calms me down and I fall asleep. So yeah, I don't know if you have an explanation to that, and I don't know if it's exactly related to today.
Okay, there's something I find interesting that's a historicist approach, and this might be relevant to Europeans. I think we're starting to judge some things about sleep where we're wanting to sleep more and we want to sleep long. But when you do study sleep literature, there seems to be like a lot of documents that stated that Europeans actually slept many sleeps at night. There are these references where I had my first sleep, and then in between the first and second sleep, the whole family would gather and they do stuff, and then they'd have a third. Some people might even have a third sleep. So it's either monophasic sleep or biphasic sleep or polyphasic sleep. Like it seems like before the Industrial Revolution and artificial lighting, when nights were longer, there are even like old medicine that talks about like it's better to have sex after first sleep. You know, after you wake up, and then like the better sex actually happens when you wake up again. So it seems like there was a culture where we were allowed to wake up at night. And I've been interested in this because when I wake up at night, I don't try to go back to sleep too quick, because when I reflect in my thoughts, I actually have like really interesting things happening. So rather than forcing myself, it might be different for people who have work like you, and I need to get up at, you know, I need to either teach kids or show up at the clinic. But I think if you freed people up, and I think that's where my story becomes a little bit relevant, and having stayed in the island, I didn't have to show up for work. I didn't have a boss. I didn't have to eat on time. I didn't have to sleep on time. And when you free that up, we don't need to see some of the hyper modes to be something wrong. If you're allowed to be that, then maybe there's something about polyphasic sleep if humans weren't so conditioned by work and family. Because I think, especially like, you know, places like Germany and Belgium, you're ruled by the clock. But if we freed up the clocks, maybe, yeah, the hyper modes might be interesting as well. But I think you are talking about interesting things about the hyper playlists actually bring about a greater onset of the spindles. And if you're not getting the spindles from the sleep playlists, it means you're not actually going deep. So that's why in the playlisting process, we need the dynamic, alive songs to predate the non-REM 3 stage when you drop it. So non-REM 3 would be actually the real beginning, but you give a false start. It rises and falls. So I think what you're doing is you're learning automatically to kind of playlist your own sleep, so that you need something more triggering because of the K complexes and sleep spindles that then would bring about non-REM. There are people who are experiencing SOREM, would be sleep onset REM periods. It's either narcoleptics or people who are super sleep deprived. They can go straight into REM. They don't need to go into non-REM 1 or 2. I don't think you're there right now because maybe of the work that you're doing, maybe you're needing to consolidate like a lot more information. And I do feel that that's really good too, because sleep onset REM periods, it's actually coming from very, very imbalanced states. And if what we're doing now is we're trying to hack the system to look for like something in between, it takes longer. So I do believe what you're sharing is very related to what we're bringing up today.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and the polyphasic thing, I spent some time in the jungle around January, and there, of course, there was no light, so I would go back. I would go to bed early without light, and also when I would wake up at night, there was no hurry to get back to sleep because I had a very long night. So I would spend like indeed an hour thinking, listening to the jungle sounds, and I would actually have great sleep there. So I think you're hitting a point for sure. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Sandrine from Belgium again. I don't know if you're unmuted or if you're okay.
I'm there. Yeah. One moment, please. Ik kom. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm still walking to the house. No, very interesting. Hi everyone. For me, I was wondering before I used the playlist or started the inner dance journey, I never remembered my dreams. It was only once in a while that I remembered my dreams. But now in the process of putting on playlists, working with the playlists, I feel that I'm going into, like you say, like a lucid dream phase. So it means that it started by remembering in the dream that, like, for example, that I saw a panda. I don't know if I already told that story, but I saw a panda in the playground before me, and then for me it was, oh, okay, it's a panda, no problem. But then I will look away, and then the panda took a tractor. I would call it in English, like let us say a bicycle, and putting on like some what do you say it in English? Alice, like he's acting like a human, so it was like gardening his hometown. And that was for me, hey, wait, this is not like because it's a panda, but that's a panda who is gardening the garden. So that for me was like, hey, wait a second. Come, let me take I want to put this on camera because nobody's gonna believe me. So I was conscious in my dream that I need to put it on tape because nobody's gonna believe that I really have a panda in the house. And you see, panda can really do this. And also like, it's the inner dance. My consciousness being in the inner dance is making me that I'm seeing the panda like he really is. And after that, yeah, then there was like some lions coming and Ellie, but that was like a realization. And then there were some other people coming in the house, but I was conscious in my dream, knowing like, okay, act normal because the things you're seeing and things you're feeling is because of the inner dance. So act normal because what this is happening, this is not normal. So it started a bit like that, but afterwards, all the dreams are getting more and more intense, that I'm really there in my dream. Notice that if I am with other people's in a dream, that I notice like they're like in some kind of euphoric state, but the things who are happening that I feel, hey, but wait a second, this is not real. Wait a second, this is strange. Wait a second, this is strange. But the other persons in my dream, they're like, they all experience it like, oh, that they're like in some euphoric thing. But it goes so far that I'm getting into places who are very dangerous, but that I notice the other ones are euphoric in the place which is dangerous, but that I know like, oh, wait a minute, I'm here for another reason. I'm here to get information. So this is all like a decause, or how do you say it? Like, and then it's like I'm dreaming about that my husband is betraying me or something like that. But it's not the emotion who is coming there. In the beginning, there is the emotion like, what are you doing? But then the other piece of me saying, oh, but this is not right. This is not real what I'm dreaming. It's not about, they want me to feel the emotion, but it's about more. It's about the information which is beneath there. Allez, it's and also it was really like stay in the dream, stay in the dream. So I was giving me information about you have to stay in the dream and you have to get information because it's not about that, it's about something else. So it's getting very strange. And it's not like every night I'm going to go to sleep like, ooh, let's see what is going to happen. No, it's also I wake up, then I think, oh my God, what is this? I write it down. And then maybe I talk to someone about it. But then, yeah, I'm like really living in the now because it's so busy. So every time I go to sleep, I never think about the dream that I had. So it's not like I go into it with a reason. And also the thing that I talked about with the eyes, like I always dream about there is something with my eyes. So I always dream that it's getting itchy, and then it's watering, and then I'm saying, I'm getting blinded, I'm getting blinded. And also that theme is still coming, and I forget that before I go to sleep. It's not like I'm thinking about it. So I forget that I'm dreaming about it. But when I'm dreaming, not every dream, then it's always in that content, or I'm like become to lucid dream to get some information. And yeah, the thing with my eyes is there again. So, and I always ask people, hey, you see, this is the thing that I told you about with my eyes. My eyes, it's with my eyes is there again. And all the people are like, yeah, oh yeah, that's not that's bad. Allee, that's not so nice for you. They hear me, but they're not acting like it. So yeah, I'm curious about how you see this into the total.
Mm. Like the interesting synchronicity here is lucid dreaming science. As far as I remember, began in Dutch psychology. So Belgians being Flemish speaking, there's something in your brains that's able to access lucid dreaming. And I think the easiest explanation of lucid dreaming is normally when you're dreaming, your dorsolateral and ventromedial, more the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is shut off. Because when it's on, you can't really experience the bizarreness or the strangeness of dream. We're still in control. But if you can turn on the prefrontal cortex in that way, along with the dream centers of the brain, it can actually be really amazing. There has to be some beta wave energy to allow you to there's a sleep scientist. His name's Alan Reshtaffen. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. It's a really weird spelling, Reshtaffen. And he talks about the single-minded persistence of the dream consciousness. I think this is really interesting. When we're awake, we're not so clear. We think we're clear when we're awake, but we're actually less clear. When we're awake, we're usually in doubt. We're always like in skepticism. But when we're dreaming, it could be like the strange dream, like the panda, like I'm a superhero, or I'm another gender, or I'm Bill Gates, or something like that. When you do, I think, study the dreams that's happening in non-REM 1 and 2, just to give like something interesting. The dreams there are less personal, and they could be about inanimate objects. They're usually not about people. But schizophrenics, for some reason, also have like strange dream states that's not always like personal. Like they're dreaming awake. Schizophrenics are dreaming awake. Anyway, Staffen talked about the single-minded, persistent quality of dream. So when you're dreaming, you're not doubting. You're there. It's weird. Like let's say you're flying, you're floating, you're like you have these magical powers, but you're not questioning that. Wait, I'm here. I'm actually here. So that when you're in the inner dance state, or just the journey state, when you're in the journey, when you're in the inner dance state, there could be this really deep experience, and when you're there, you're not doubting. There's same single-minded persistence is there. You're literally there. You're in the universe, or you kind of forget that you're not there. That's like a really deep space that we can bring people into. But for me to make this practical, because I conduct like a lot of trainings, that's my job. It's the work that I do. It's my passion. I take care of my kids, and I train. I give trainings. I give understanding of this energy. That's what I do. So when I'm with the kids, or when I'm like doing other things that's not to do with the trainings, I have a dream state inside me. It's kind of the opposite. So that, okay, if you're lucid dreaming, it means your prefrontal cortex is awake while you're dreaming. This is the opposite. I could be in my prefrontal cortex, but I could also be dreaming. So when I'm studying, I need to be able to access like a lot of information. It's exactly what Sandrine is saying. I need access to a lot of information, but I need to tie them together. So what is important for me is a concept called continuity. If I take care of something really well, it's continuity. So that I could be having a conversation with like a bank manager or um, a parent or a doctor. I'm not losing my place. Okay, I'm accessing my hippocampus and entorhinal cortex where I can still see the whole map where things are connected. So when people are speaking, it's like I'm still dreaming. For me, dreaming is really just a way of establishing multiple connections while you're still living in time. You're still accessing space. So I think we can lucid dream, and then people are lucid dreaming are also lucid waking. Lucid sleeping, lucid waking. I think we're able to hold more continuity. I think this is one of the changes that probably a lot of you guys are experiencing, that you're seeing more connections. Like you're seeing that all the stories actually belong to a much bigger story. One academic researcher once called inner dance to be like a TOE. He said there are many thinkers who establish like TOEs, but he said inner dance seems to be a TOE. It's a theory of everything. A lot of people think it's a spiritual modality. No, it's also a philosophy or a way of understanding everything, because we're also experiencing everything. May as well understand everything. So when you learn to build continuity, I think that would help a lot of depressions, a lot of emotions, a lot of, when we start to think without losing our thought while still also feeling our feelings, because that is also another way of thinking. Thank you. Okay, let's go to Corinne. We have 15 minutes or a little bit more. Sorry, I think are you muted? Or no, you're not muted, but we can't hear you. Maybe something with your microphone. Let's go to Natalia first, and then we'll go back to you, Corinne, while you discover what's with your mic.
So I have, thank you. I have two questions. And talking about sleep, what does it mean when people have very light sleep and wake up very easily? Does that mean they rarely go into REM stage? And does it mean the opposite for deep sleepers? That's one question. I don't know if you want to answer and then go with the next one, or should I go to the next one?
Let's go to that. When people aren't experiencing deep sleep, as we mentioned, it's not getting enough sleep spindles, meaning they're not letting go of what they were holding on in the day. Usually cortisol levels are high, meaning the stress hormone is being released and they're not able to deal with it. Cortisol is very relatable to high glucose levels, which means maybe they ate too much. Too much blood sugar leads to high cortisol levels, and insulin levels aren't able to deal with things. So a lot of it's metabolic, but it's also very emotional. It's they need to kind of let go. So we're trying to build these playlisting systems where people might be able to release the tension that they were holding during the day. Okay.
And then the next one is, what happens for people that fall asleep while in a session? What does that mean? Are they not going through the process properly? Are they still going through the process but at an unconscious level? Or does it have the same effect? And how can we support them through this?
Some of them are actually going deeper than the ones who are having experiences. They just are not remembering. So sometimes, like in a circle, they're quiet, or they would say, like, I fell asleep. Sometimes I would ask them, did you really fall asleep? And then they would remember, oh, wait, I was somewhere. So this is where we begin to study dimensionality. To be honest with you, when I construct a playlist, I actually go for those. I love those experiences. I don't never judge them when it is brought up, because people might be in anticipation, they're building expectation. I want to have that, when the one who's screaming, the one whose body's moving. I want to have that one. There are many experiences, there are many levels, many dimensions. And for some reason or another, in the last years, more and more people are going into this half sleep, half wake state. there's something in the human based on, you know, using so much of media, having sleep deprivation. I think a lot of people are actually looking for this. So I have many experiences where people kind of complain like during the session, like I didn't go through anything, but then I would see them the following week and then they say my whole life changed. So they just weren't aware. So don't allow people to go into experience seeking. Sometimes deeper layers of consciousness will, you know, it's just about trust. Like tell them, trust it. You know, you're given what you need, not
Okay.
always what you
Thank you.
want. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So let's test the microphone of Corinne. Let's see if it
Hi.
works. Ah,
Can
good.
you hear me?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see if I have a question, but it was a lot of information. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a lot about death and rebirth, and I wanted to ask if we will speak again about that point. Maybe that's the first thing. Body temperature. Yeah, it was also super interesting, and I personally experience in my life hormone changes which affect my sleep, and I now understand really very much why I feel that I'm not I don't have a good sleep. It's not just because I am awake maybe more times during the night, but it's just because of these waves which are not that regular, and that I don't go so well into deep sleep as I used to go. So I just want to go further and study that a little bit more to understand that. It was also really very helpful for the session to understand what are the waves of sleep and the connection with the music and the playlist, because funny enough, I don't know, no, it's not funny, but I was told that music had no power in a session, but I just felt the contrary. It was just what if everything is energy, music is energy more than anything. So it was really very helpful, and also to have these answers to the people who ask me, and they ask that a lot. What is the role of the music inside the session?
Mm.
And I guess I have two questions. One is, what about recurrent dreams who come back all the time? And I experienced that myself, but people have asked me too. And the second one is, what about when people come with a specific need in their life? I mean, I understand that you get, as you told, right now, you get what you need and not what you want. But if people, for example, are suffering about sleep, because I know that this energy can help, some people come back to me and their sleep, they just got better, or yeah, they could finally rest with these sessions. But how do you help, or how do you construct your music, your playlist, and the waves in order to help these people?
Okay. Yeah. The second is a really, really big question. A lot of the answers will come in the course, the subsequent. Let's go into the recurrent dream first, because this could be interesting. It's important. This needs to go a little bit into philosophy, but because we are in the we're talking about this theme anyway, it's time to go into it. So this is what the mind and body could look like if we were a matrix or a grid. This is space and this is time. Time unfolds in a sequence, and space is a simultaneity where things are happening like all at the same time. So when you conduct a session, you have these options of either creating a session that's more time oriented or more space oriented. When the music is sequential, meaning It's too thick. When the music is sequential, where songs are happening one at a time, you tend to trigger time and history a lot more. So the processes tend to be very personal and emotional and biographical, let's say. When you hold more space, and we'll give you some techniques on how to use music that's more spatial than temporal, then the sessions become less personal, like impersonal. This is when people start going into the universe, go cosmic, go back into the womb. So that's beyond trauma work already. It's really going more into the 0 point and helping people to access a lot more connections. So in dream theory, like this is in Sigmund Freud, there are different types of dreams. And this is in Freud, probably, and Lacan. Um, different types of dreams, and dreams that are more to do with time is called dream displacement. Now, this is when there's a lot of dreams. Like when you're dreaming, sometimes there's like a lot of dreams following each other. Like this is then it goes to that dream. That's called dream displacement. So it's rather interesting that you can actually playlist these so that you might have these sessions where it could be one experience after another. Now, if you're dealing more with spatial and simultaneous and instantaneous elements, this is when you start to build layers. Let's say you're starting to put all the songs artistically on top of each other, and you're using the noise app, you're using different tools. This is what Freud calls dream condensation. Now, when people have recurrent dreams, condensation is beautiful. It's displacement is when language you're like pushing meaning away. You know, one word after another, one dream, one story after another that doesn't really get to a point. Now, when you experience like a one dream, could be a one image, it could be a one inner dance, one experience, one journey, and you're staying there. You're not leaving the room. The dream condensation is the ability to unify all the meanings into a one space, and there's a lot more information actually embedded there. That's when convergence and divergence can happen at the same time. Okay, displacement would be more linear. Convergence would be more like a mandala, where in and out either it all meets in the middle. That's what condensation can do. So if you're already able to go there, like stay there. So I think that's already interesting for a lot of you. That number one, yeah, with music, whenever people say like the music doesn't matter, they're trying to create a mysticism, and it doesn't help to bring power to the mystified. It actually disempowers people. It's there's a lot of ego in that type of explanation, and they haven't put in the time and the work. You want to bring the system into consciousness, not just the person, because that's we can inflate ego very, very quickly there, and people can make money through that kind of thing. You want to awaken people. So music is like going to be one of the most important sciences out there. Like there's still not that much understanding of how music triggers the brain. We're studying that, and in the work that we do, we actually have more inputs than many scientists because of the experiences. We know that music isn't just music anymore. It's a collection of vibrations that matches what's already inside. I don't remember your second question. It was so big. What was it again? Do you remember it?
Yeah, the specific needs of people when they have some.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a big topic. We can't go into it so much today. We're gonna be discussing the hypothalamus in the next set of calls. The hypothalamus is the power center of the brain. Even small changes in the way you touch people, speak to bodies, hold music, position bodies would influence the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is the king, it's the queen. It would influence the limbic system, the neocortex, the autonomic nervous system, and the endocrine system. It's the master regulator. So because of the sheer complexity of even the fact that if you do a group process, one single playlist is supposed to speak to all the bodies. Already that's quite hard to conjecture. So it would be interesting to understand what is the one part of the nervous system and the endocrine system that regulates everything else. That's what we're going to be studying in the short and the long term. I think if we understand that more, but there is some complexity to it, we're approaching it slowly. So this comment you guys would have, there's so much information. It's because there's so much energy and you were born with that complexity. You know, when you were born, you weren't given an instruction manual. This energy is the instruction manual and how it works. Yes, we will go into birth and death. I would love to talk about that more. We've had some really interesting experiences where, like I midwife my children. We didn't have doctors and midwives. I was the midwife. I helped to birth them, and it was the music that birthed them. But there are interesting stories of people who are actually using the music in their death experience, like how people are going through the sound in birth, but it's also helping them to go to the other side. Inner dance and the work that we do is also you can either be a birth doula or a death doula. It's the same process. It's actually the same process. And thank you for your comment on core body temperature. Small things that we do, even in the sessions, diet, exercise, but the sessions can change the timings of the cycle of temperature, sleep, wake, and it would either delay or advance, or it would just make it just right. We take this slow. We don't know what just right is. Like the rhythms know better than we do. So just keep observing that. Thank you. Okay, so Hema, your turn.
Yes, hello, thank you. I have two questions. So one is related to what you just said before with the dream condensation, because when I now meditate, it feels like I'm not there anymore. It's like taking me out, and I feel like I'm sleeping, and I feel like I'm not getting anything out of the meditation because I'm not there anymore. So that is it the dream condensation? That's the first question. And the second one, it happened that it feels like, I don't know, maybe you know something about that and what it is, that I wake up on like different levels. I wake up, I'm awake, and I hear a lot of languages, people speaking, like a lot of languages, but then I wake up fully and I'm like, where are these people? And I'm awake and obviously they're not there. So what is that?
Okay. It's not as much about condensation. Wait, I'm trying to find my cursor. Wait. I'm trying to activate my screen and my cursor is now in my iPad, so I can't open. Okay, now it's back. Share screen. Now let's go into the brain app. Okay, so when we think about dimensionality, what we would need to study in the next months would be epilepsy. So we would be epilepsy is a study of how activation spread. You know, like a lot of people use the word activation, and one of the meanings of activation is neural spread, which is electricity starting to explode through different pathways. So the thing that I showed you would be the most featured. When people pass out or go into different dimensions in consciousness, it means that you're actually experiencing a mode of epilepsy. And if your body is not moving, and then you just go into phasing out. It's usually a generalized epilepsy. It means that you fired up your whole brain, which is a good thing. But it's also kind of scary because you can go places with that. That's what electricity would do. So epilepsy is a spiritual disease. It's not a bad thing. It's called the sacred disease in the ancient times, and it's very connected to the Kundalini rising experience. I forget. Wait, did you have two questions? I think I answered one. Did you have another one?
Yeah,
Like
the first one, that was the one
hippocampus.
with meditation, I guess. But
Yeah.
then
Okay.
is there something coming from that at some point? Because I come back and it's like, yeah, okay, I'm awake again. I slept kind of, but I didn't get any insight or whatever. It doesn't feel spiritual or anything. It feels like
the dimension. The dimension itself is the spiritual thing. What you're getting isn't the content, you're getting the channel. The channel is the dimension. You're getting to peek into the dimension. So it doesn't seem spiritual because you're not being given an experience. An experience is usually content. So imagine like a container. Let's say okay, the content is these coins and it's this evil eye. um that's the content. So a lot of people, they're looking for content. When you get the channel, you're getting the container. You see what I mean? Like the channel is the dimension, and when you're given the dimension, there's content inside there. That's you remember Inception, that dream within the dream movie by Christopher Nolan. When we're going now into deeper dimensions, we normally don't remember because there's so much information packed in. So you have these sort of glimpses or memories. Oh wait, I had those, but there was so much going on, but I don't remember. It's because like in those dimensions, an hour is not an hour. A minute is not a minute. It's like a million years. Why would you remember? You know what I mean? So I think we're inching our way into those dimensions. We're not learning them, we're remembering them because they're always there. They exist in parallel universes. We're not allowing ourselves to fully go into it because we'd lose ourselves. A lot of people have gone into psychosis just by it's not a big difference that separates us from those dimensions. We can actually easily go there, but we have built strong gating mechanisms so we don't slip in there. And the work that we do is allowing us to slip in there in the most fun, crazy, interesting ways. So some people do start lapsing into those while they're awake. I know people who are at work, they suddenly are living in two dimensions at the same time. And we're learning to balance it, I think. So I'm not worried about it. I think it's amazing. And so what you're sharing is actually quite similar to some of the other questions. I think a lot of the experiences and the trainings people have had are quite monotonous or monochromatic, that a lot of people are told in trainings, okay, if you're not moving, you're blocked. If you're not having an experience, you're blocked. That means there's something wrong with you. We need to change that sort of thing. It's number one, judgmental. It also traps the facilitator because then you're ending up with making sure everyone has a good experience because let's say they're paying money. It would really trap you. We need to change our language and our frameworks because sometimes people need these things that you guys are describing, but it's not what they're wanting because of what they saw on social media or a website or a video. So more and more, and we will be sharing musical options for a lot of you. You will be taking a lot of people there. So it's good we're talking about it. It's good some people are experiencing it and it's being shared. We need to become aware of this. A lot of these would have to do with light language, aphasia, epileptic stages when there's so much electricity passing through. Electricity is our ancestor. People talk about ancestors. You want to ask who is your most primal ancestor? It's electricity and magnetism. So if you unleash that in your system, it's gonna do stuff to you, and already we're unleashing. It's not just a session anymore. This is real. Okay, so this has been amazing. I hope this is good. This is gonna get more and more weird and complex and beautiful and interesting between us. So thank you for the questions. Let's keep the conversations going in our own groups. And for now, if you can unmute and help me to close and say good night, love, good morning.
Gracias.
Bye.
Good night.
Merci. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Okay. Bye bye,
Bye.
everyone.
You bye.
Bye
Love,
bye.
love.
Bye.
Sweet dreams.
Dreams too.
Thank you.